There isn't a way with our AED, or really any AED, I should say, on the market, for you to deliver a shock when you shouldn't, right? Or not deliver a shock when you should, because the AED is making all of the decisions, the clinical decisions, and analyzing the patient's heart rate and determining what needs to happen. So that's a really important thing to stress for anybody who's saying, should I use this thing or shouldn't? You can't mess it up.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Safety Gap Podcast. I'm your co-host, Cassidy Shield. I'm with my lovely co-host, Karen. Karen, how you doing?
I'm great. It's Friday. I'm happy.
We tend to record on Friday. And Karen, did you travel this week, or were you able to stay at home?
Yes, I traveled this week. It was a really, really cool trip. I was actually in DC this week, which I love. Going back to DC, I love it in the fall. The weather was phenomenal. But it just reminds me, like, it's such a privilege to get to be in this place where history's made each and every day, and the historical sites and places and museums and the business that's happening there, the things that are occurring as you watch people, going from building to building. It's really just amazing to absorb it. So
yeah, it sounds like a great time.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right, well, let's welcome our hosts, or our guests. Not our host, that's us, Karen, but our guests. Meir Berkman. Meir, you're the Vice President of Strategy and Business Development at Avive Solutions. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Appreciate you having me and quickly promoting me to the position of host. I'm happy to take it on.
Well, if you do a good job, you're in, so we could always use another person. Karen's looking to replace me, so you're a candidate. Also, former RapidSOS, which we had a chance to catch up on a little bit earlier. So welcome back to have a conversation with Karen, which I know you know.
Yeah, I'd just say it's always great to be back with RapidSOS, and I have the wonderful opportunity to work with many people from the team virtually every week at this point. But the company is a family that's committed to incredible work in public safety, and I feel like it's a family you really can't get out of. So I may have moved to a different business over time, but still love the business, love the people, love the mission, and very proud to be a part of this.
You have, and I'll just tell you again, Meir, like, I'm so proud of the work that you're doing and seeing your growth, just even at a human level. Honestly, it's been really fun. I got to work with you, and now we get to work with you in a whole different way, and just I love watching you, so keep going.
Thanks, Karen. Appreciate that.
So Meir, with that, obviously we all love what you do and honored to be a partner with Avive. But for the audience, it'd be great for you to kind of explain who is Avive and what you do and kind of, the origin story of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Avive Solutions is, at the base level, is a manufacturer of AEDs. I think at a high level and a more important level, we're a company and a business and a group of people that are committed to helping improve survivability from sudden cardiac arrest. And the founding story of the business is that our three founders were not satisfied with a couple decades of the same survival rate from this thing that affects over 350,000 people in the United States every year. 10% is the survival rate that we've had in this country for 3 decades or so. And despite the efforts of many communities throughout the country to deploy AEDs all over the place and investing many, many billions of dollars in doing so over the course of about 30 years, we really haven't seen the material increase in survivability that we would like to see. And that was the core issue on which our founders latched and decided we need to do something to change this paradigm. And the solution was, not only do we want to build a defibrillator, but we want to build a defibrillator that is more likely to be used quickly. And the enemy of success in the clinical condition of sudden cardiac arrest is time. For every 1 minute that a patient experiences a cardiac arrest and doesn't receive care, there's a 10% increase in mortality. So you can do the math. You look at your average response times across the country, you wait 8 minutes for an ambulance, the best shot you got is 20% at survival. And so we said to ourselves, how do we build an AED that is more likely to be used quickly? Not that changes defibrillation, which we know works from a clinical standpoint, but that's going to get to the patient's bedside or where they happen to be in a faster way. And the solution that we've come up with over time and that we've now had on the market for a couple of years is both a smaller device. I think I've got one actually over here on my desk. There we go, smaller device. But also a device that is connected to a broader ecosystem, connected to the people that need to manage those products, and most importantly, through our relationship with RapidSOS, connected with 911, offering it the ability to be notified when it's nearby to a cardiac arrest, which we'll talk about, and also offering it the ability to provide situational awareness to responding public safety members. We've been developing this and bringing it to market for quite a long time, and we're very, very excited to celebrate it being on the market for a couple of years now and saving lives on a regular basis.
Hey, Meir, for those watching this on video, hold that up again. Let's see that.
There you go.
All right. This does not look like what I imagined from watching movies and TV shows.
No, and that was candidly quite intentional, right? I think one of the biggest things is that, we build these AEDs. Historically, they look, act, and feel like professional scale medical devices. But who are we asking to use them most of the time? We're asking the untrained citizen, the untrained civilian. And so we need to build a product that looks, acts, and feels like something that they're going to be comfortable interacting with and confident in using to save that person's life. And so the design of the product wasn't just because it's cool to make it smaller and have a screen and look sleek. It's because we want it to look, act, and feel like the type of stuff that we interact with every single day, reducing the barriers that somebody could potentially put in front of themselves when they're thinking, should I use this thing or should I not?
So let me get this straight. I want to go back through the numbers for those who may not be as familiar with this. So 350,000 sudden cardiac arrests happen each year outside the hospital, and the survival rate you said is 10%.
That's correct. And obviously there's a variance throughout the country. There are some communities that are doing exceptionally well and much better than 10%. And there are some communities that are in very low single-digit survival rates. And so, that average of 10% has a lot of different ends to it. But yes, 10% for a couple decades already.
And it seems like people understand that one of these devices can make a big difference. And they're out there. And I think you mentioned this is not a new technology, but yet the dynamics have not changed. Like, we've had this issue for quite some time. So why is it that the awareness is higher that this technology can save lives, and obviously time matters, but yet it hasn't changed the outcome over the last, X number of years?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to pretend to know all of the answers, but I think we've got a couple of core beliefs. The first is that, generally speaking, I don't think we know where these things are, right? So if you are by somebody's side inside of a restaurant and they experience a cardiac arrest, you probably don't immediately know where the defibrillator is. And when we talk to telecommunicators who ask the callers when they call, hey, is there an AED nearby? The answer the vast majority of the time is no, or I don't know. So I think finding the thing is a big challenge here. That's perhaps number one. It's also probably why survival rates in places like casinos are exceptional, right? There's tons of devices, there's cameras all over the place, and the likelihood that somebody who knows where the AED is going to be able to respond quickly is way higher. But in your general public access setting, most people don't walk into a hotel or walk into a bar or walk into a business and the first thing they say to themselves is, where's the AED? And so when that emergency happens, they don't know where it is. I think that's probably reason number one. Reason number two is because I think that, these devices are intimidating, as we mentioned before. And so even if you know where it is, you may say to yourself, am I the right person? Do I really know how to use this thing? Maybe I should just wait for the first responders to get here. And to go so far as there's even some AEDs out there sitting in cabinets, and the cabinets say for trained responders only, right? That is the opposite of what we want, obviously. We want anybody who is nearby to grab that thing off the wall. And so to overcome this stigma or this challenge associated with people believing that it's too complicated for them, it's not something that they can use. And then I think the third and arguably most significant portion of this is that the vast majority of the AEDs placed throughout our country and really throughout the world are in what we would consider the public access setting, right? They are in the gyms and schools and shopping malls and places where it's really important that they are because people do experience emergencies there. But the vast majority of cardiac arrests, 70% on average, but in many communities we talk to over 90%, are happening in people's homes. And so the AEDs that communities are procuring and putting out all over the place are not benefiting the vast majority of patients who actually experience this clinical condition. And so I think those are the three core challenges that we've identified as to why these AEDs are not being used anywhere close to the degree of frequency that we would want to see them being used.
So this seems to be a little bit of a misnomer. Like my belief coming from before I knew what you did and was in the public safety space was the gym and, out in public where you're exerting yourself. That's where this happens. And it may tend to happen for people who are out of shape or older versus young and in shape. And what I'm finding is those things are not true. They're kind of myths. Like, this normally happens in the home, and it can happen for people of any age and any kind of fitness level. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, Karen knows this about me, but Cassidy, I'm a paramedic. I've been in the EMS for over 10 years at this point. I still respond to emergencies in New York City as a volunteer, and I go to cardiac arrests with some degree of frequency, and almost all the cardiac arrests that I've ever responded to in my career have been in the home. It's pretty rare to get the cardiac arrest outside of the home that you're responding to. And so I think you're exactly right. And then this is something that affects all sorts of people. This is not just, the older population with tons of risk factors, right? We saw Damar Hamlin collapse in the field. He's got to be one of the healthiest people out there, right? And so there are genetic conditions that can lead to this. There are things that can happen physically that can lead to this. There are types of underlying medical problems that can lead to this. And so this is why it's important that these devices are in schools, are in those types of public settings. But yes, it affects all sorts of age groups. It is not merely an issue of the elderly.
I would love to get into a couple of these other points that you made. But first, let me ask you, Karen, I can't even imagine what it must be like on the other side of the phone when somebody calls in when this is happening. Do you mind kind of just, paint us a high level picture of kind of like what's the reality when somebody's going through this and they call 911, today, in most cases?
Yeah, typically when cardiac arrest occurs, the person that's calling on behalf of the patient is in a panic. They're in a frazzled state for obvious reasons, like somebody is either, just fallen or showing those indicators, and they don't necessarily know what's going on and what to do. And so in that heightened state, they're freaking out. They're not able to respond to questions maybe as easily as possible. And when you ask them, like Meir said, I need you to get an AED once you've asked them all the questions and gone through your protocols. And they're like, either I don't have one at home and I don't know where one is, and that can create frustration as well. And then also, as you mentioned, Meir, there's that fear of like, I don't know what to do. I'm not a trained responder. I'm using these paddles potentially if they even have them accessible. And so there's this fear of like, oh my God, if they're almost here, I can let somebody else do it. And so for the telecommunicator, we have to go based off of the guidelines that are given. We can't deviate from the questions, and you have to ask things in a specific order. And we also can't yet, and this is changing too, see what's going on scene with the patient either. And so that telecommunicator acting in a little bit of a blind spot, it's scary. It's just quite frankly scary. And so these are the calls where you're like hoping and praying that your responders are driving as fast as they possibly can and you have the closest units available. But in rural communities, or in snowy conditions. So like here in Colorado and in Chicago, you got a lot of snow. You got those folks that are out there shoveling that leads to cardiac arrest as well. And that can create challenges with getting the right resources and apparatus to the scene because now they're driving in dangerous conditions. They can't go as fast. And so all of the things just kind of create that high level of anxiety for that telecommunicator to make sure that there is survivability of that patient.
So let's break a few of these things down. Let's first start with, and Meir, you mentioned this, how are you approaching this, or how are we approaching this differently in terms of being able to identify and access one of these devices? In terms of the call happens, how do I know that there's one around me, and how do I get access to it?
Yeah. Well, maybe just to jump in a little bit on kind of what we've changed in the marketplace, what our product offers, and specifically what our integration with RapidSOS unlocks for these communities. The device is fully connected. It's got Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cellular, and GPS technology built in. And that allows a variety of core functionalities. But the most interesting and novel one here is that connectivity with 911 through RapidSOS. And the connectivity, enables a couple core pieces here. Number one is that we recently unveiled a feature, right, where if the AED is in use already, and the people that are treating that patient and the device is in the process of analyzing that patient, in the background through RapidSOS, we're going to provide a notification to the comm center, letting them know that there's a cardiac arrest via both the phone and also letting them know on the screen that there's certain data available to them from the device. So you can see, has a shock been delivered? You can see, is the device in adult mode or is it in pediatric mode, right? And these are just pieces of situational awareness that'll make the response more effective. It can even make it more quick in certain situations if we get a better location to them from the device than perhaps you might get from the caller. So that's one feature. We call that our quick rescue feature, right? But in our highest operating communities, we've turned on the opposite of that as well, which we call intelligent response. And this is the ability for that telecommunicator, when they receive that terrible phone call that somebody's in cardiac arrest, to not merely rely on, hey, is there an AED nearby? To which we know the answer is almost always going to be no or I don't know. But we give them the ability to take action, and they can press a button inside of their RapidSOS console. And what that's going to do is it's going to activate the AEDs that are nearby to that cardiac arrest. So think, no longer are we saying, hey, is there an AED nearby? Go and grab it. The AED that's on the wall is going to yell and scream at the people that are around it and say, take me to this place, somebody needs me. And so that's the change of the paradigm. And I think what's really important here when we think about kind of the clinical course of treatment of a cardiac arrest patient, we talk about the chain of survival, right? And there's all these different components of the chain of survival. Every single one of them is important, from the person that recognizes the patient that has a cardiac arrest, to the telecommunicator that picks up the phone, to the first responders, and not just EMS, by the way, police, fire, EMS, and others that are responding to this cardiac arrest call, to the hospital that receives care, to the cardiologist that provides care after the patient has been resuscitated. All of those people are involved. And what we tend to forget is the AED as a core component of that chain of survival, because historically it hasn't been connected and it couldn't be a part of it and nobody could see what was going on with it. And now, in partnership with you all, we've been able to change that. In these communities that we're working with, the AED isn't just like this ancillary box that sits on the wall that maybe will be used some percentage of the time. It is a core connected part of the chain of survival that the telecommunicator has really strong insights into what's going on with it, where it is, and when it's being used, and if it's being used correctly.
So let me kind of walk through these scenarios to see if I have it correct. That was a good explanation. So first, I have the Avive AED, and I'm using it. It actually notifies 911 for me. Now, of course, you still want to pick up the phone and call, but if you're in the middle of doing this, it's alerting 911 for you. That's what I understood. And then in the second scenario, I don't know where an AED is, and I've called 911, and the telecommunicator on the 911 side has access to be able to see where an AED may be around the caller and can hit a button, alerting the person with the AED to bring it to the incident. Is that fair?
That is exactly right. And you made a very important point, for what it's worth, which is on that first feature, we never want to instruct anybody not to call 911 when they come across an emergency. That is the first and most important thing that they should always do. This feature adds an additional layer of safety and security and reassurance that there is a notification being placed behind the scenes, and provides access to that enhanced information that the caller likely wouldn't have at their fingertips. So that's 100% accurate. And then your description of the second feature is totally correct. We are empowering the telecommunicator with more information than they otherwise would have had, and we are now actively soliciting people to take those devices and bring them to the patient, no longer relying on the first rescuer to go and search and find an AED. And then the way that we deploy those devices is important too, right? And in many of these communities that we're working in, we are not only putting them on the wall of the gym and the shopping mall and the public building, but we're actually giving them out to civilians even who are in the community, such that you can be sitting in your home with an Avive Connect AED and receive a notification that your neighbor is in cardiac arrest and have the opportunity to run across the street and save their life before any of the first responders are able to arrive.
Yeah. I think that peace of mind too for the telecommunicator is having that visual on RapidSOS Unite that shows that AED coming. Even before maybe it shows the responders coming. Like, I know that there's going to be a device on scene very quickly. The reassurance that I can give to the caller is also like that peace of mind, and knowing that, I was able to do my best today to try to save somebody's life. And that's all at the end of the day we want to do, right?
Karen, let's unpack that second scenario. I just want to make sure the folks understand this. So in that scenario, the telecommunicator is hitting the button to alert the AED. Mm-hmm. And what you're saying is like the TC will be able to see that the AED is being actually brought, like whether walked across the street or down the block or whomever, to the incident. Is that correct?
Yep, absolutely. So that call comes in again, telecommunicator clicks on that phone number. They've already identified through their protocols that they need to have an AED there. So they click a button that says launch AED. They'll have the ability to confirm the address if the caller is at the location of the emergency already. But in many cases, the caller may be reporting an emergency at a different address. Maybe they're at the neighbor's or the emergencies at the neighbor's house, etc. So the telecommunicator can update that address. It will notify the AED, as Meir mentioned. And once it has been activated or it's en route, you see this little icon on the map in relationship to your 911 call, so you can see it coming. And even more important, with some of the other integrations that we have that show your field responder locations, I can not only see the AED coming, I can see my paramedic coming, my fire truck, I can see my law enforcement agents coming into the area. So just having that visibility again and that reassurance, like every time I talk about Avive and what you do and what we do together, I just get the chills because it is so impactful for any person that experiences this cardiac arrest to have that potential for their life to be saved. And what does that mean for the family members? And what does that mean for the person who called to report it? Whether or not they even know those people, right? That they did something to save somebody's life as well. So, watching the videos that, you all have done, and I've been blessed to be part of that as well, just gives me the chills about the potential of true life-saving actions with all of the folks that are involved in that emergency response, as you mentioned. And now here's this thing. It's part of that response now. That's really cool.
And Karen, we had the we had the ability to celebrate one of those just a couple of weeks ago, where a gentleman went into cardiac arrest. Somebody who was driving by saw it and picked up the phone and called 911. The telecommunicator, this is in Cumberland County, Pennsylvania, activated that system. One of our civilians deployed with an AED who was around the corner got that notification. They picked up their device and they promptly responded to the incident. They got there first and were able to deliver multiple shocks to that patient. That individual was brought to the hospital and stood up at a podium with us just a couple weeks ago, thanking those responders alongside his family. Going into the holidays, there's really nothing more meaningful than that kind of an opportunity. That is a patient who, absent this type of an integration, probably wouldn't be with us today. And so the power of this work is unbelievable. And when we have the opportunity to celebrate those saves, it just makes it all that much more powerful.
Man, I love hearing those stories. Thanks for sharing that. Karen, so that's getting the AED, which is great, getting it to the incident. The other thing that Meir mentioned was this new capability around the AED is either proactively notifying 911, but also sending along the information of adult, child, I'm sure the ribbon and whatever, the information. Like, what does that do for first responder, having some of that data and context before they even show up, knowing that there's been some action undertaken?
Yeah, well, it's great because we get a phone call as well and that digital information that gives more context. So, we always talk about the game of telephone and how long sometimes verbal relay of information can take. Well, if I have that verbal relay, fantastic. I always want to keep connected to voice, but I can also see the latitude, longitude of where that AED is being utilized, the time since the device has been activated. So that's going to be in seconds. I may be able to see, what's going on in the current workflow, the device pad status, like just information I would be blind to, quite frankly, of what is happening with the device itself and those paddles. Subscriber information, like who actually has this thing that's being used right now and what is their information. So whether it's a business, a person, again, contextual information really helps in these matters, that I can see it, I can read it, I have access to it. I could deliver that out to the field, whether they're not yet on scene, while they're still responding, or while they're on scene as well, for them to close the loop as well. Let me know if I missed anything in that.
I don't think you missed anything. I would add one piece here, though, which is clinical data, right? And one of the pieces of information that we share with the telecommunicators through this program is a little code. And if they take that code and plug it into our website, they actually are able to look and see the type of ECG rhythm cardiac rhythm that patient is in. Now, that may not have a tremendous amount of utility for the telecommunicator, but I can tell you from the perspective of the paramedic who's responding, knowing whether this is a VFib patient or a VTAC patient or an asystolic patient is really, really impactful for me. And then when oftentimes those telecommunicators are playing a role in providing a pre-arrival notification to the receiving hospital, giving them access to the clinical data is even more important, because a patient, for example, that was in VFib as the presenting rhythm may go directly to the cath lab because we believe they're having an ischemic episode, whereas a patient who was in VTAC would like to get a different course of treatment. And so sharing this information clinically provides a ton more situational awareness than has ever been available to both clinical first responders as well as physicians and other care providers that are going to provide treatment to that patient once they arrive at a hospital. And historically, the way to get this data off of an AED has been plug it into I don't even know what, like some proprietary cable and a proprietary computer on a special piece of software. It doesn't happen until like 9 days later that you get the data. And this is probably the first time with a basic AED that through this integration, we're making that information available to all of the clinical responders and care providers very, very quickly to drive better care for that patient.
Yeah, and one thing that I maybe didn't even cover as well is that flow down out to the field, right? The telecommunicator doesn't necessarily know what that means, and maybe they do because they've had certain training, but in the moment, their responsibility is getting those field responders out to the scene. So number one, it can come in that supplemental way where it's along with a voice call, and it can create this digital alert, which through the workflow, we can actually send that also into the CAD systems. So it is delivered out to the field, and then through our field applications also sent to the field. So making sure that end to end, we're getting it out to the people that are going to be showing up, the folks that really need it, whether it's not just for their patient response reports, but also to show the hospital what's gone on with the patient from the time of indication, right? And that's key for that hospital staff to make the right decisions.
Yeah, what I love about this is as a, everyday consumer who has a family, this is how I would expect the technology to work if you could ideally lay it out. So I love the fact that when you hear this story, you're like, hell yeah, this is awesome. This is what should be done. This is what should happen in order to, help save your loved one's lives. So it's just remarkable. I love hearing this. So this is pretty clear in terms of what the device does and how it signals 911, the information it shares, and, how you can ensure that you understand if there's a device around you. Meir, I want to come back to another point you made, and that is the intimidation factor. So I personally, when I think about this as someone who's not trained, I'm like kind of daunting, right? Like I have the device, and somebody's obviously in need. You don't want to mess it up. So walk us through like the modern way that you do this versus maybe like what it used to be in the past before you guys came along.
Yeah.
In terms of ease of use.
Well, first of all, you can't mess it up. And I think that's the most important thing that we stress for civilians who are thinking whether they should or should not use this. Right?
I'm relieved, by the way. That's good to know.
There isn't a way with our AED, or really any AED, I should say, on the market, for you to deliver a shock when you shouldn't, right? Or not deliver a shock when you should. Because the AED is making all of the decisions, the clinical decisions, and analyzing the patient's heart rate and determining what needs to happen. So that's a really important thing to stress for anybody who's saying, should I use this thing or shouldn't? You can't mess it up. So you really got very little to lose. You should definitely use it. And I also want to highlight the importance of the work that the telecommunicators here do, right? Which is the telecommunicators are providing absolutely critical instructions over the phone to people who are experiencing the worst emergency that they've ever experienced in their entire life, right? To a wife who found her husband unconscious on the floor in cardiac arrest, and that telecommunicator is walking them through getting their husband on the floor on a flat surface and exposing their chest and doing chest compressions, and then if there's a device available, helping them to use that AED. And so we shouldn't understate the absolutely heroic and incredible work that telecommunicators do as far as cardiac arrest goes. Oftentimes it goes understated or even unstated, and it's really important that we recognize that. The ease of use for our device Starts obviously with what the device looks like I mentioned before, right? The first step in ease of use is willingness to use. And if it looks, acts, and feels like a product that I'm going to be comfortable with, it's way more likely that you're going to use it in the first place. And so I think that's where the curved bezels and the beautiful screen and all of those components become really, really important. And then there's a couple other things that we've done here. The first is we've embedded a Spanish mode on the product, so we've made it accessible from an instructional perspective to people who speak Spanish and understand Spanish, not just English. The device has a screen, and so in addition to the audio instructions that it's going to provide to the user, telling them exactly how and when and where to apply the pads and what steps to take, we're providing visual instructions to the user as well. So if they're in this rush and they just don't, they're not hearing what's going on, they can rely on the screen as well in terms of understanding how to apply the pads and how to do what they need to do to help save this person's life. So that's really important. We also only have one set of electrode pads. So most AEDs that you'll buy out there on the market have a set of electrode pads, those paddles, so to speak, for adults, and then another one for pediatrics. And so if you come across a child in cardiac arrest, God forbid, you're going to have to know to unplug the adult pads and then plug in the kid pads and use those. And we think that that's just ridiculous. We can't expect somebody experiencing this type of an emergency to have to make that kind of game time decision and figure out how to do it. And so we've just put a button on the top, and the device tells you proactively, if you are treating a child, just press this button, same set of electrode pads, it will reduce the electricity to the appropriate dosage for a pediatric patient. So again, from an ease of use perspective, we're just reducing additional barriers. And then, the other piece that I'd say here is, this might sound silly, but we were really specific about the voice that is being used on this device when it's providing instructions. There are a number of AEDs that you can use that are out there that have this angry robotic voice telling you remove the patient's clothing, apply all this stuff. And they're not wrong, they're giving the right instructions. But I think it was really important to us to try and provide a voice that was going to be reassuring, was going to be calm, but also be assertive, giving people confidence. And so we've gone with that type of voice that we think is going to make it more likely that individuals are going to feel comfortable, confident using the product. So those are just some of the pieces in terms of how we think about giving people everything they possibly need and making it as easy as it possibly can be, reducing as many barriers as we possibly can so that they use this device and they feel really confident with it.
Yeah, as a marketer, I love and appreciate the attention to the detail. It really feels like from the ground up, you put yourselves into the shoes of the person who is going to have to use this to think through how to make it very easy for them. So really appreciate that.
And I think, Cassidy, just one other piece to touch on here is that I think is really important is women are disproportionately not receiving defibrillation or pre-hospital care from citizens. And I think there's a lot of people who hypothesize the reason why that's the case. But one of the core challenges is people don't know that they are supposed to remove the shirt or remove the bra even to be able to deliver effective care to these patients. And that was a big part of our decision, both to have a female voice speaking from the device, as well as to audibly instruct the rescuer that they need to remove the patient's bra. And so, again, we're trying to solve the problem for everybody. We're trying to overcome some of these historic disparities as it relates to cardiac arrest survival and make the device that much easier to use for the everyday citizen, not just the super trained provider.
Yeah, very clever and insightful. I wouldn't have thought of that, but now that you mention it, it makes complete sense. Men aren't obviously as smart as women either, so that has something to do with it.
That I can agree with.
Where I want to go next with this is the picture to me is pretty clear, and we have a compelling device that obviously can save lives, and it's easy to use, and it connects into 911 pretty seamlessly, which we've discussed the value of that in terms of speed of response. It feels like the next challenge is getting this out in the market and pervasive everywhere, and then there's probably a level of education that goes with that as well in terms of making people aware that these devices are out there. So I don't want you to divulge any trade secrets, but when you think about what does covering, let's call it the United States, look like in terms of you think the number of devices that need to be out there versus maybe the number of the devices that are out there today, and kind of where are we in this journey of having this be just pervasive technology all around us that we can get at a moment's notice, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, we're really grateful that since coming to market, the reception to the marketplace has been incredibly strong. And so we now have thousands and thousands of our AEDs all across the United States and receive phone calls all the time, almost weekly, telling us about lives that were saved with the product that's out there. So in terms of its broad scale availability, it's out there. You'll see it, and there are thousands and thousands more that are going out all the time now. So that's wonderful. The 911 connectivity functionality related to calling 911 when you use the device is available through RapidSOS in any community across the country, right? Not just a community that is specifically enrolled in this program to have all of the smart components of intelligent response. And so I think that's one thing that's important to talk about here, or to mention here. But the core functionality, all of the 911 functionality that allows the telecommunicator to dispatch the AED as an asset, right, and see the data as it is responding to that cardiac arrest, that happens within what we call our 4-minute community program. It's named 4-minute community because the goal is let's get somebody with an AED on the scene treating that patient within 4 minutes, right? If we can do faster, then that's great, but that's the goal of the program.
The significance of 4 minutes in terms of response time.
Yeah, well, I think statistically speaking, right, if we know that the curve brings us to a 10% reduction in survivability for every 1 minute that a patient has been down without care, right, if we get somebody there providing care within 4 minutes, we're jumping to a 60% chance of survival for them, which is considerably stronger than the 10% or less that on average patients have been afforded. And this is based off of both that data and what we believe to be realistic from our understanding of where cardiac arrests are happening and deployment models of where we can place devices. So that's a little bit of the intelligence behind it. And I would love for the day that we go to a 2-minute city, right, or a 2-minute community where we up that probability to 80%, right? But I think 4 minutes is a ambitious goal that is considerably stronger than what our country is doing today as far as our national averages go.
And so walk me through a little bit about this program. So I'll give an example. I'm in Wheaton, Illinois. Let's say I want Wheaton to be a 4-minute city. How does that work? How many devices do I need? Who do I talk to, et cetera?
Well, I want to start by telling you how it doesn't work, right? Which is it doesn't work without the telecommunicators in the comm center, right? The whole entire thing doesn't work from a, intelligent response dispatch perspective. Obviously, if our telecommunicators are not there playing an integral role and don't have access to the tools and the technology they need to be able to do this. That's how it doesn't work, right? How it does work, right, is bring it to us. Come to Avive, come to RapidSOS, and tell us that I want to be a 4-minute community. And you don't have to be the director of your 911 center. You don't have to be the director of public safety for your county. We'll talk to anybody, all right? Because it's our mission to bring this to as many places as we possibly can. And you can be the hero that spearheads bringing this program to your community. It starts with one conversation. Call me, call Karen, call anybody from the RapidSOS team, from the Avive team. We'll get you in the hands of the right person to be able to begin having that discussion about unlocking that technology in your community. In terms of how many devices and how we do this strategically, right? One of the core components of the onboarding process for our new 4-minute communities across the country is what we call a community assessment. And this is where we actually look at your historical cardiac arrest data, your response time trends, your survivability trends. We look at demographic differences, all this really important stuff. And we build a case for what is happening today and what we can create in the future and how many devices we likely need based off of how big your community is from a population standpoint, a landmass standpoint, frequency of cardiac arrest standpoint, et cetera. And we make that recommendation and we work with the community to finesse that recommendation based off of their input. And then ultimately, we actually partner with the community to go and source funding to be able to make this a reality. And oftentimes there are hospitals in the community that are helping to fund this type of a program, or philanthropies in the community that are helping to fund the program. And Avive partners alongside public safety leadership to go and identify that funding and make sure that we can make a way to make it happen. The bigger part of this, the bigger challenge, and then I promise I'll stop talking, but the bigger challenge, right, is getting a public safety set of leadership, law enforcement, fire departments, EMS organizations, 911 organizations, getting them all on board with the fact that there is a problem and we are going to collaborate together to build a solution. And if I have that in a community, we'll go find the money and make it happen, right? If I have all the money in the world, but I don't have collaboration with public safety, I can't do it, right? So the first step, give us a call. Tell us that you're interested. Tell us that you want to do something like this, and we'll partner with you to make it happen. We would love for there to be a 4-minute community in every community across the country.
Great explanation. This feels like an amazing movement that we should all get behind. And for those listening out there, if you want to get your local public safety or 911 facility involved, you should call Karen, because I have yet to find anybody in the country that she does not know.
I knew you were going to say that.
I can pick an ECC in the middle of, Iowa or something and ask Karen if she knows who runs it, and she does. So it's amazing. Meir,
She's
great
been doing this
explanation.
for long enough.
Yeah, exactly. How many, where are we in kind of the journey of the 4-minute city? I assume you have many communities out there, and obviously you want to get every community to be a 4-minute city, but how long's the program been out there? Any success stories that are public you can talk about?
Yeah, we have a few communities that are live today that have been live for just about a year now. We've got a community in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, additional communities turning on in the coming year in the state of Florida. So quite a bit going on that front in terms of just having communities up and running. And yeah, I think that's sort of the way that we're thinking about scale is, we need more communities to reach out to us, to be willing to partner with us, to do something innovative, to do something different, and to sort of, stand in the forefront of technology to be able to bring this type of thing forward. And on the success front, I shared that story that happened in a 4-minute community in Cumberland County. And we have multiple stories across all of our 4-minute communities where we have civilian responders grabbing their AED after being alerted by 911 and going and working to help save the life of a patient. And so this is not some far-fetched concept. This is reality today, and it's working. And now it's our time to shine, our time to grow it, our time to scale it, and to bring it to more and more places.
And Meir, for public safety, they can also become their own 4-minute city, right? So you can put these AEDs on a motorbike, on, a bicycle officer, or other places in their community where maybe, they want it to be a little bit more accessible, your soccer coaches and things like that as well.
That's exactly right. We have, in the 4-minute communities that we work in, say we've got a couple hundred devices that are deployed with civilians. We also have devices deployed with law enforcement, who are almost always the first responders to show up at a cardiac arrest call. We have AEDs in schools. We have AEDs on DPW vehicles. The need for defibrillators in the public setting is tremendous. And so we deploy devices with civilians. We increase the likelihood of early defibrillation dramatically with that. And then we make the power of the network and the connectivity even stronger the more and more units that we're able to get out into the field, into all of those different locations, Karen, that you just mentioned.
Yeah, I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot, Meir, but the conversation we had before we started recording, I also found fascinating, tied into the 4-minute city, and that is these devices may or may not be completely affordable for an individual, but when I think of it from a city perspective, it's my understanding that not only do you have superior usability, the connectivity to 911 and all the stuff we talked about, but you're also probably the most cost-effective solution on the market. Would that be fair?
Yeah, as far as the feature set that we have to offer, there's nobody else that's available at the price point that we're in the market right now. And that's, by the way, not to understate the difficulty of identifying funding to do these things. It's no simple task. But we like to think that we're doing our very best to make the device as affordable as we possibly can. And then I think this is probably the direction that this question is going, right? But devices today are in that public access setting, are in the hands of our care team members or those citizens that are responding. There are people who ought to have these devices in their own homes because they are at high risk or their family members are at high risk, and they're at high enough risk that there is high enough value for you to just have this thing in your house. And today we offer a couple different purchasing modalities that might make it easier or lower cost for those individuals to get one for their homes. But the real answer, right, that is not available, at least robustly yet today, but that we are committed to continuing to pursue, is finding ways to get healthcare insurance companies and the federal government through Medicare, Medicaid programs to reimburse the cost of AEDs for patients that are at high risk for cardiac arrest. And that is something that we are on in an ongoing way prepared to knock down the doors of Capitol Hill to make that happen. But I think it's one of the most important things that we can focus on, knowing that 70-80% of cardiac arrests are happening in the home and that there are many patients that are at high risk.
Yeah, hopefully that's just inevitable that will happen. So I appreciate you going through that, because it's rare that you find a product that has this level of capabilities and is also most cost effective on the market. That's a powerful combination. And when we think about cost, just to be clear, and I'll see if Karen wants to elaborate on this, connecting this into 911 is free for 911. So Avive and RapidSOS do not charge 911 centers for this capability. It just exists for them, and all they need to do is use it. Anything I missed on that, Karen?
Nothing at all.
Perfect. All right, we'll be cognizant of time here. Put on your, pull out your crystal ball, and let's think a few years in the future, 3 to 5 years out there. Where do you imagine we are? What are the types of things that you'd want to innovate in the product? How pervasive is the technology? Floor is yours to kind of talk through how you see the future.
Well, I think hopefully a couple years down the line, we have hundreds of these 4-minute communities that are spanning across the country. This has become more of a standard of care in communities than a novel or innovative thing. And it's just, as you mentioned before, right, as a consumer, as the average civilian, you would expect that this is how it works. And hopefully we can make that truth for civilians and individuals that expect the way that our public safety architecture works to support that. So that's number one. The second piece is, my sincere hope is that we have pushed the bounds of that 10%. 30 years is too long for us to be saying 10% over and over again, and our national average should go up by multiple points over the course of the next couple of years through these types of programs, through these types of partnerships. I think the ultimate hope at the end of the day, people ask me, like, what is the ROI for the program? I get that question sometimes. We're going to invest X amount of money, and what do I get for it, right? And the answer is, what dollar value can you place on the life of an individual that you might save, right? And obviously the answer to that question is an infinite dollar value, right? There is no amount of money that you could assign to the life of any individual person. And so my hope in a couple of years from now is, as the product continues to evolve, as we span the program into additional communities, as we grow our partnership with RapidSOS and with many more ECCs and 911 centers across the country, public safety agencies across the country, we are able to share many more stories of people who have the opportunity to continue to celebrate holidays with their families, continue to live their lives, continue to interact with their children, and continue to grow older and older because of the program that we're building here together. So that's my optimistic outlook here, and I believe that we can make it happen.
Yeah, we run across technologies like yourself where the outcome seems inevitable on where we're going to be. Now it's just a matter of how long is it going to take us to get there. So I can speak for Karen to say we just love partnering with you in the mission, and we're in it. It's to see how many 4-minute cities we can get across the country and how fast we can do it. So appreciate the time, Meir. Well, how do people get a hold of you in Avive if they listen to this and want to learn more?
Well, I just give my cell phone number here on the podcast, and people can call me. No, people.
I was like, wait a minute, this could be a first.
Call Karen. She'll give you my cell phone number. That's totally fine. I would say people can reach out to us a number of different ways. Certainly, you can go to our website, avive.life, not .com, avive.life. We've got a phone number on there. There's somebody staffing those lines that'll pick up the call and direct you towards the most appropriate person for your question, for your community's needs. That's number one. You're also welcome to send an email to our 4-minute community team, and that is 4, the number 4, M as in Mary, C as in Charlie, at avive.life. And so if you are a telecommunicator listening to this, if you're somebody in public safety listening to this, if you're just somebody in a community that wants to bring this to your community listening to this, you're welcome to reach out to us at that email. We will get back to you promptly, and we'll work with you on seeing what we can get done.
That's wonderful. I love that, Meir. We'll make sure all that is in the show notes, and I'll speak for Karen and myself. We're happy for people to reach out to us. You can find us on LinkedIn or rapidsos.com. We're here to help as well. Meir, Karen, thank you very much for your time today. Super insightful. Love the partnership and appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Safety Gap. This podcast is powered by RapidSOS, where we're dedicated to closing the safety gap through intelligent safety technology. If you're passionate about creating a safer, smarter world, be sure to follow The Safety Gap wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information and to catch up on past episodes, visit us at rapidsos.com.